This video is about how the camera on the iPhone 15 Pro Max is overrated. There's been a lot of hype about this phone and the camera on it since Apple shot their M3 announcement video entirely using the iPhone 15 Pro. I just was struck by the absurdity of having such a resource production, insane resources that pretty much only a huge corporate entity can afford, and then in the middle of all that, putting a really mediocre camera that happens to spit out really generous files. I thought that was kind of laughable, and I wanted to make a video to tease out what is so good about the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Optically, this phone has nothing special going on. The cameras inside it are basically exactly the same as the previous generation of the iPhone, and those are almost exactly the same as the previous phone before that. Where this phone is insane, and I made a previous video about this, is the processor. This is like the most advanced processor mankind has ever made, and it happens to be tethered to 4 really mediocre cameras. The primary strength of this phone is not its real optical abilities, but it's the computing inside it, which is insane. Much better than an ordinary, like, you know, it's a modern mirrorless camera. Optically, this one is way better. This one has a much better processor. So even though the images are probably a lot nicer out of the camera on this one, the depth of field is better. Your colorist is probably going to be happier to get an iPhone file than they will to get a file out of this camera. What would be sick is if you could fuse the two. If Apple could put their A17 chip inside a Canon camera or something like that, this camera would be fucking fire. I've gone ahead and I've put the iPhone 15 Pro directly above the lens on my main camera here, toggling back and forth. This is the iPhone 15 Pro. This is my main camera. Now, obviously comparing a cinema camera to the iPhone is a little bit like taking a knife to a gunfight, but it lets us suss out what the iPhone is actually really good at. I am using the Blackmagic software to control the iPhone camera manually. And the first thing you notice is that the background on my main camera is pretty blown out. It's not super easy to read this stuff, but on the iPhone 15 Pro, you can see everything. It's all totally in focus still. That right there just shows you that the optical quality of the tiny little cameras inside the iPhone are no match for a big cinema lens like the one that I'm using on the main camera here. This is an f-stop 1.8 on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Every shot out of my main camera is at 2.8 for this whole video. And just to blow this point up even further, I've gone ahead and I've zoomed in all the way on both cameras. This is 90 millimeters, and you can see that everything in the background is totally, like my hand right now is totally fuzzy. On the iPhone 15 Pro Max, this is the most zoomed in camera. This is the Tetra Prism camera, equivalent of 120 millimeters. I've also got it all the way open. In theory, this is f-stop 2.8, theoretically the same f-stop, and as you can see, all this stuff that's blurry on my main camera is maybe not totally in focus, but much sharper. This is the shallowest depth of field I can get on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. And as of late 2023, Apple is running a television ad showing that they can add depth of field artificially. Again, showing that it's the superior computing of the iPhone that allows it to make up for really mediocre optical quality. I've got it set to a log color profile because that is the main strength of this phone. It spits out these big fat Apple ProRes files that you can then take into DaVinci, which I don't have and I'm not using right now, and you can color grade them really adeptly. If you look at Peter McKinnon's video, he did a beautiful job. He's got great LUTs. I don't know what his workflow is like, but you can really see that the iPhone 15 Pro footage is really receptive to the color grading that he's doing. I don't know that workflow and I haven't done a good job here. I've experimented with a bunch of different LUTs. Let's try, you know, one LUT, another LUT, another LUT, another LUT. I haven't found a LUT that I think makes this frame look good. A better colorist could make this shot look a lot better than it does. One other point that I didn't appreciate when I was shooting it, but now that I'm in this hotel room editing it, unintentionally, I actually threw the iPhone kind of a curveball here. This is kind of a tricky shot because you've got a lot of mixed temperature bullshit. Daylight coming in from the front, but then all this tungsten, in some cases like very orange, 2200 Kelvin coming in from the back, giving all that like hair light. The red doesn't really struggle with it, and the iPhone, it's making all that tungsten super yellow. I can't get it to do anything aside from that. My coloring process here is really not that great, so feel free to be cynical. My basic assessment is that the color science on the iPhone is actually shittier than I thought it would be. And at this point, if you're wondering, this shot is not colored at all. Out of the SDI connection on my camera, I'm running the SDI into this, which is a USB encoder, and I'm recording it internally onto my computer here. It's just taking whatever color profiles on the red, and the file format is way smaller by like 2 orders of magnitude than the files that the iPhone is outputting. I want to go through a little bit on this video that Apple made, behind the scenes, an Apple event shot on the iPhone. If you watch the original event video, the top of this video contains all these really beautiful shots. You can see like fingers typing on a keyboard with insane depth of field. If you read the subtext, it says event shot on the iPhone. This is not the event. This is shot on a much better camera. This part of the video where the actual event starts, this is where it's all shot on the iPhone. And as you can see in the behind the scenes video, they have a very, very well-resourced production. They have the iPhone on like really overkill setups. They have the iPhone on what appears to be a Ronin 2. A Ronin 2 is a huge gimbal for like a big cinema camera, like an Alexa or a Red or something like that. And they have the iPhone on it for some reason. If anything, that just goes to show you how resourced this production is in relation to the shitty ass camera that they're actually insisting on using to prove a point. They have a DIT on set to control the color while they're shooting it. The people they're interviewing are at Company 3, a professional coloring shop in Manhattan, and they're taking the ProRes files with log format that the iPhone is outputting, and then they're really putting their like maximum DaVinci on it. So as you can see, the color on all these shots looks pretty great. The blacks are super crushed, the dynamic range looks great, but they're also super lit. The punchline is, if you have an insanely resourced production, and then you have insane post-production, not just a good colorist, but like a big coloring firm like producers and probably rounds of edits or whatever, you can put a really mediocre camera in the middle of that whole event, and as long as that camera is outputting a good file format, the event will turn out pretty nicely. You're not really going to sit there and question what camera it's on. I think for me, the biggest takeaway is if your color is good, it makes it seem like your camera is good. The moral of the story is focus on the content you're making, not the camera. You got people like me who have got really nice cameras. You've never even heard of me probably. And then you got people shooting on the iPhone, TikTokers or whatever, kicking ass, living in mansions with infinity pools, or doing OnlyFans, making millions of dollars beating each other off and filming it on the iPhone. I spent this whole video ripping on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. But I want to make it clear, I'm lucky to have this phone and the cameras inside it. Because when I go to an underground wrestling match in Brooklyn, the iPhone 15 Pro Max helps me capture the moment.
Thank me, motherfucker! Thank me!
In moments like these, there's no camera I'd rather have than the iPhone 15 Pro Max.